The year is 671 before the Common Era. Memphis burns as Assyrian soldiers storm through the royal palace. King Taharqa of Kush flees south, abandoning his wives and children. Behind him, Egypt's greatest monuments stand witness to his defeat. But this catastrophe began decades earlier in sacred council chambers. Flashback 24 years to a secret meeting at Napata. Kushite priests gather beneath the shadow of Jebel Barkal's sacred mountain. They whisper of Egypt's collapse and divine prophecy demanding intervention. Young Prince Taharqa listens as his uncle plots the impossible. They will conquer the greatest civilization the world has known. Nubia rises from the desert south of Egypt's ancient borders. For 3,000 years, these kingdoms traded gold and war. The Nubians built pyramids before Egypt stopped building their own. They worshipped Amun when Egyptian priests forgot their own gods. Now they would save Egypt by conquering it completely and forever. This is the story of the 25th Dynasty of Egypt, the Black Pharaohs who ruled from Sudan to the Mediterranean Sea. They fought Assyrian super armies and defended Jerusalem from total annihilation. They built more pyramids than any civilization since Egypt's Middle Kingdom. Yet Western history forgot them for 2,500 years. You will witness King Piye's ruthless conquest of a divided Egypt. You will see Taharqa's armies clash with history's most feared warriors. You will discover how archaeological finds rewrote African history completely. The mysteries buried in Sudan's sands reveal truths that challenge everything. What happened when Africa's greatest kingdom challenged the ancient world? If you find this documentary useful, please like and subscribe. Now witness the conspiracy that changed the course of human civilization. 760 before the Common Era begins with Egypt divided. 4 rival kings claim Pharaoh's throne, but none control the whole. Libyan warlords rule the delta, splitting it into warring city-states. Upper Egypt fragments under princes and priests fighting for scraps. No one remembers when a true pharaoh last united both lands. 800 miles south at Napata, the Kushite court watches. King Kashta assembles his council beneath the sacred Jebel Barkal. The mountain's flat top resembles a cobra ready to strike Egypt. Ancient prophecies carved in stone declare Amun chose this place. Kushite priests read omens, saying the god demands they intervene. But this is no sudden religious fervor driving Kushite ambition. For 5 centuries, Egypt ruled Nubia with crushing colonial brutality. Pharaoh Thutmose III destroyed the kingdom of Kerma completely. He dragged Kushite nobles in chains through the streets of Thebes. Egyptian viceroys governed Nubia, extracting gold and enslaving thousands of people. Yet Egypt also planted the seeds of its own future conquest. Thutmose built temples to Amun throughout Nubia, spreading Egyptian culture. Young Kushite nobles studied in Theban schools, learning hieroglyphic writing completely. They absorbed Egyptian religion art and the pharaonic ideology of kingship. Now as Egypt collapses, Kushites see themselves as true Egyptian heirs. Kashta's daughter, Amenirtis, becomes the key to the entire conspiracy. The aging god's wife of Amun in Thebes needs a successor. This priestess controls vast temple estates and religious authority in Egypt. Kashta negotiates secretly to install Amenirtis in this powerful position. The adoption ceremony succeeds, giving Kush control over southern Egypt's religion. Kashta's son Piye inherits both the throne and his father's ambitions. The young king stands over 6 feet tall, trained in warfare. He breeds the finest horses in the ancient world from Arabia. Kushite cavalry and chariots dominate battlefields throughout the Nile Valley. Piye's stables hold hundreds of war horses ready for the coming invasion. Intelligence reports reach Napata, describing Egypt's accelerating collapse to chaos. Prince Tefnakht of Sais in the Delta forms a northern coalition. He conquers neighboring city-states, absorbing their armies into his own. Tefnacht marches south, threatening the Theban priesthood loyal to Kush. The priests send desperate messages, begging Piye to intervene immediately. Piye convenes his war council in 728 BCE. His generals argue for immediate invasion before Tefnacht grows stronger. The priests demand action to protect Amun's temples from desecration. Piye's sister Amenerdis sends word that Thebes cannot hold much longer. The king performs elaborate rituals seeking divine approval for total war. He spends days in Amun's temple at Jebel Barkal fasting. The priests emerge, declaring the god commands Egypt's complete reunification. Piye orders mobilization of the entire Kushite military machine immediately. 20,000 infantry assemble armed with bronze swords and axes. 800 cavalry prepare along with dozens of war chariots. But Piye crafts something more subtle than simple military conquest. He positions himself as Egypt's moral savior, not foreign invader. Proclamations declare he will restore ancient traditions the Libyans abandoned. The propaganda emphasizes his devotion to Amun and proper Egyptian rituals. Many Egyptians begin viewing Kushites as liberators, not conquerors at all. The army marches north in 727 BCE. Piye sails flotillas down the Nile carrying supplies and soldiers. His advance guard secures territory without major resistance at first. Egyptian princes calculate whether to resist or submit to this force. The conspiracy Kashta began now explodes into open military campaign. Prince Nimlot of Hermopolis faces an impossible choice between masters. He swore loyalty to Tefnacht, but Piye's army approaches fast. Nimlot sends secret envoys to both sides, playing them against each. He promises surrender to Piye while begging Tefnacht for reinforcements. The prince's double-dealing will prove fatal to his entire city. Meanwhile, Prince Pefjawawibast of Heracleopolis watches events with growing terror. His city lies directly in Piye's path toward the Delta region. Pefjawawibast commanded forces against Kushite interests in Upper Egypt before. Now he realizes his previous actions have marked him for destruction. He sends tribute and hostages to Piye, hoping to avoid siege. But Tefnacht forms his own desperate counter-conspiracy in the north. He contacts Assyrian merchants seeking weapons and military intelligence about Kushites. The Delta Prince offers trading concessions for technological support against invasion. Letters travel to Mediterranean powers describing the Kushite threat to everyone. Tefnacht builds a coalition of fear, uniting princes through terror. At Thebes, the priesthood of Amun executes its own scheme. They spread prophecies declaring Piye as the chosen one of God. Temple scribes compose texts linking the Kushite king to ancient pharaohs. The propaganda machine turns Piye into Egypt's legitimate ruler before battle. Religious authority matters as much as military might in Egyptian politics. Piye's flotilla reaches Perpeg, where Tefnacht's coalition makes its stand. The northern princes gather their combined armies for one decisive battle. They outnumber Piye's advance forces, but lack Kushite discipline and cavalry. The conspiracy has reached its breaking point on the Nile's banks. Tomorrow, blood will decide whether Kush conquers Egypt or dies trying. Dawn breaks on the Nile as both armies form battle lines. Tefnacht commands thousands of Egyptian soldiers from his war galley anchored. His coalition forces fill dozens of boats, approaching Piye's position rapidly. The Delta princes believe their numbers will overwhelm the Kushite invaders. They do not yet understand what Kushite cavalry can accomplish. Piye's forces wait on the east bank near the city walls. His archers take positions on high ground, overlooking the river completely. The Kushite cavalry holds back, hidden from view in reserve formation. Piye himself performs morning rituals to Amun before joining his troops. His generals grow impatient, but the king refuses to rush divine timing. The Egyptian boats reach the riverbank and soldiers pour out chaotically. Tefnacht's coalition lacks unified command, with each prince commanding separately his. They scramble up the muddy banks, trying to form proper lines. At this moment, Piye's archers unleash volleys of arrows from above. Hundreds of Egyptians fall screaming into the Nile, turning water red. The Egyptian advance collapses into confusion as officers shout contradictory orders. Some princes order retreat back to boats, while others push forward. Piye's cavalry explodes from concealment, charging into the Egyptian flank completely. Kushite horsemen wielding bronze axes cut through the disorganized coalition forces. The battle becomes a massacre as Egyptians flee in pure terror. Corpses bob against the riverbank as crocodiles thrash through carnage. Tefnakht watches his coalition shatter from his galley deck above. He orders full retreat, abandoning thousands of his soldiers to slaughter. The surviving princes flee north, spreading panic throughout the Delta region. Piye's army pursues slowly, letting terror do their work for them. Nimlot's betrayal comes due when Piye arrives at Hermopolis walls. The prince who played both sides now faces the consequences completely. Kushite forces surround the city, cutting off all supply routes. Nimlot sends desperate messages to Tefnakht, begging for relief that never. The betrayer realizes no one will save him from his choices. Piye orders siege towers, constructed from timber stripped from nearby groves. The king personally supervises construction, ensuring proper height and stability always. These towers will allow Kushite archers to fire down into city. No one in Egypt has seen such sophisticated siege warfare before. The psychological impact demoralizes Hermopolis defenders watching towers rise daily. The siege lasts weeks as Hermopolis starves behind its walls slowly. Nimlot watches his people grow desperate, eating dogs and rats. He realizes Piye will never negotiate with a proven traitor like him. The prince sends his wife and children with tribute, begging mercy. They approach the Kushite camp carrying gold and precious stones desperately. Piye receives Nimlot's family with cold, calculated mercy and contempt. He accepts the tribute, but offers no promises of leniency whatsoever. The king enters Amun's traveling shrine, performing elaborate purification rituals again. His religious devotion impresses even Egyptian priests traveling with his army. This conqueror fights not for plunder, but for divine restoration always. Hermopolis finally opens its gates as starvation overwhelms resistance completely. Nimlot prostrates himself before Piye, begging for his life and city. The Kushite king spares him, but takes everything of value away. The royal stables contain horses, and Piye discovers them starving, neglected. His fury at animal mistreatment exceeds his anger at human resistance. Piye's army turns toward Heracleopolis, where Pefjawawibast awaits judgment nervously. The prince who sent tribute hopes his earlier submission will save him. But Piye has learned of Pefjawawibast's previous attacks on Kushite territory. The king enters the city and strips it bare regardless of. Only the temples of Amun remain unmolested by the conquering army. The Kushite forces push north toward Memphis, Egypt's ancient capital city. This prize represents the symbolic heart of pharaonic power and legitimacy. Tefnakht has fled to the delta, abandoning Memphis to its fate. The city's walls stand 30 feet high, built from massive stone. But Piye brings something Memphis has never faced before in war. Kushite engineers construct boats capable of scaling the river walls directly. They launch amphibious assault using the Nile itself as attack route. Soldiers pour from boats onto Memphis's river defenses in overwhelming numbers. The defenders never imagined attack from the water side of defenses. Within hours, Memphis falls to Piye's forces and opens all gates. The king enters Memphis in triumph, performing purification rituals at every temple. He worships at the ancient temple of Ptah, offering elaborate sacrifices respectfully. Egyptian priests witness a conqueror who understands and respects their traditions. Piye wears the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt finally, but the Delta remains unconquered, and Tefnakht plots his revenge constantly. Piye marches into the Delta, pursuing Tefnakht through the marshy terrain. The coalition princes who survived Perpeg gather for final resistance desperately. They meet the Kushite army near the Delta fortress at Mesed. This time the Egyptian princes have learned from their previous defeat. They form proper defensive positions, using the terrain to their advantage. The battle rages for an entire day, with neither side gaining. Piye's cavalry struggles in the marshy delta ground, limiting their effectiveness. Egyptian infantry holds firm behind defensive earthworks and water channels here. For the first time, the Kushite advance stalls against determined resistance. Piye realizes he cannot simply crush every delta city by force. He shifts strategy from total conquest to political submission instead completely. The king sends envoys to the delta princes offering generous terms. They can keep their thrones if they acknowledge him as pharaoh. One by one, the princes calculate and choose submission over destruction. Tefnacht himself finally sends tribute from his fortress at Sais, but Tefnacht refuses to come in person and prostrate before Piye. The Delta prince swears loyalty through intermediaries, but never appears himself. Piye accepts this compromise, understanding the limits of his power here. Total conquest of the Delta would require years of occupation warfare. The king chooses instead to return south to consolidate his victory. The victory stela of Piye will record these triumphs in stone. Carved at Jebel Barkal, it describes the campaign in elaborate detail. The text emphasizes Piye's devotion to Amun and proper ritual observance. He presents himself as Egypt's restorer, not its foreign conqueror ever. But darker forces watch from Mesopotamia as Kush's power grows. In Nineveh, King Sargon II receives reports about developments in Kushite conquest of Egypt threatens Assyrian interests in the eastern Mediterranean completely. The Egyptian princes Assyria-controlled now swear loyalty to Nubian pharaohs. Trade routes that brought gold and grain now flow to Napata. Sargon's advisors warn that Kush represents a rising strategic threat. Meanwhile, Piye's brother Shabaka ascends the Kushite throne in 710 BCE. Unlike Piye, who ruled from Napata, Shabaka moves to Memphis permanently. The new pharaoh understands Egypt must be ruled from Egypt itself. He establishes full Kushite control throughout the Nile Valley completely. Shabaka begins the cultural renaissance that will define the dynasty forever. The pharaoh restores temples abandoned during decades of civil warfare. At Karnak, massive construction projects employ thousands of Egyptian workers daily. Shabaka commissions statues, blending Nubian and Egyptian artistic styles together beautifully. The synthesis creates a new aesthetic, celebrating both cultures equally always. Egypt experiences peace and prosperity it has not known for generations. But in 701 BCE, the storm breaks from the east. King Sennacherib of Assyria launches a massive invasion of the Levant. His armies are the most advanced military force in the world. Iron weapons, siege engines, and professional soldiers crush all resistance everywhere. Cities from Syria to Judah fall before the Assyrian war machine. King Hezekiah of Judah sends desperate envoys to Memphis begging help. Jerusalem faces annihilation from Sennacherib's siege army, surrounding it completely. Shabaka's nephew Taharqa now commands the Kushite Egyptian military forces brilliantly. The young prince is 20 years old and eager to prove himself. He leads an army north to confront the Assyrians at Eltekeh. Taharqa's combined Kushite Egyptian army marches into Judah in the summer heat. 20,000 infantry move alongside 800 cavalry toward the Assyrian positions. They carry bronze weapons against Assyrian iron, but possess superior numbers. Kushite archers prepare their composite longbows capable of piercing armor completely. The army camps near Eltekeh, where Sennacherib's forces await their arrival. The Assyrian army represents the pinnacle of military technology and training. Professional soldiers drill daily in coordinated formations and tactical maneuvers regularly. Their iron weapons cut through bronze like butter in close combat. Assyrian siege engineers have already demolished a dozen cities in this campaign. Sennacherib himself commands from a fortified position on elevated ground. Both armies form battle lines at dawn on the appointed day. Taharqa rides along his troops, performing rituals and invoking Amun's protection. His cavalry takes position on the flanks, preparing to envelop Assyrian. The young prince knows his horses give him tactical advantage here. He orders the attack, and the armies crash together in fury. The Assyrians' iron weapons take terrible toll on the Kushite infantry. Taharqa's front lines waver as Assyrian professionals cut through them systematically. But the Kushite cavalry sweeps around the Assyrian flanks, causing chaos. Horsemen, armed with axes, slash through Assyrian supply lines and reserves. The battle becomes a grinding stalemate, with neither side gaining advantage. Sennacherib watches his army struggle against the African cavalry he underestimated. He orders his chariots forward to counter the Kushite horsemen effectively. Iron-reinforced Assyrian chariots crash into the cavalry lines, breaking their momentum. Taharqa realizes he cannot achieve decisive victory against this enemy today. He orders fighting withdrawal back toward Egyptian territory under discipline. The Assyrians do not pursue, having suffered heavy casualties themselves. Sennacherib's army maintains the siege of Jerusalem, but lacks strength to. Disease breaks out in the Assyrian camp, killing thousands of soldiers. Biblical accounts describe an angel of death striking the invaders down. Sennacherib abandons the siege, returning to Assyria with his diminished forces. The confrontation at Eltekeh saves Judah but costs Egypt dearly overall. Taharqa returns to Memphis, claiming victory, but knowing the truth completely. The Assyrians remain the superior military force, threatening Egypt's future constantly. King Shabaka dies shortly after, and Shebitku takes the throne briefly. Within 4 years, Taharqa himself becomes pharaoh in 690 BCE. The new pharaoh launches the most ambitious building program since Ramses. At Karnak, he adds a massive colonnade to the Temple of. The columns stand 60 feet tall, carved with scenes of triumph. Taharqa builds new temples at Kawa in Nubia, celebrating Amun's glory. At Jebel Barkal, he creates a monumental temple complex rivaling Karnak. The cultural flowering under Taharqa represents the dynasty's golden peak always. Artists blend Nubian and Egyptian styles into harmonious new forms beautifully. Sculptors carve statues showing pharaohs with distinctly African facial features proudly. The Meroitic script begins development as Kushites create their own writing. For 17 years, Egypt knows peace and prosperity under Taharqa's rule. But Assyria watches and plans revenge for its humiliation at Eltekeh. King Esarhaddon ascends the Assyrian throne in 681 BCE. He inherits Sennacherib's ambition and his father's hatred of Kush. Esarhaddon begins assembling the largest invasion force Assyria has ever fielded. Iron weapons, siege engines, and tens of thousands of professional soldiers prepare. In 674 BCE, Assyrian armies invade Egypt's eastern border suddenly. Taharqa leads his forces to meet them in the Sinai desert. The first major engagement ends in Kushite victory, pushing Assyrians back. But Esarhaddon regroups and returns in 671 with overwhelming force. The largest battle of the ancient world approaches Memphis's walls again. Esarhaddon's army numbers over 100,000 soldiers marching into Egypt. They employ siege technology and tactics the Kushites cannot match effectively. Assyrian engineers construct mobile towers and battering rams from prefabricated components. The professional soldiers coordinate complex maneuvers that overwhelm Egyptian defensive positions. Taharqa watches from Memphis as the unstoppable tide approaches his capital. The battle for Memphis rages for days as Kushites defend desperately. Assyrian siege towers roll against the walls under covering fire constantly. Battering rams pound the gates, while archers suppress defenders from above. Taharqa's forces fight with courage, but lack the technology to prevail. The walls crack, and Assyrian infantry pour through the breaches like. Taharqa realizes Memphis cannot hold against this overwhelming assault force ultimately. He orders evacuation of the royal family and treasury south immediately. The pharaoh fights a rear-guard action, allowing civilians to flee successfully. But Esarhaddon's cavalry intercepts the fleeing royal party outside the city. They capture Taharqa's wives, children, and most of the royal court. The Kushite pharaoh escapes south to Thebes with a few loyal guards. Behind him, Memphis burns as Assyrian soldiers loot the ancient capital. Esarhaddon declares victory, installing native Egyptian puppet kings to rule Egypt. He takes Taharqa's family to Nineveh as hostages and proof of. The Assyrian king erects victory stela, showing the Kushite pharaoh in. But Esarhaddon makes a fatal mistake by not pursuing Taharqa south. The Kushite pharaoh still commands armies in Upper Egypt and Nubia. Within 2 years, Taharqa counterattacks, retaking Memphis from the puppet kings. Esarhaddon dies, preparing to return to Egypt and crush the rebellion. His son, Ashurbanipal, inherits both the throne and the Kushite problem. The new Assyrian king Ashurbanipal inherits his father's unfinished war completely. In 669 BCE, he launches another massive invasion into Egypt. This time, the Assyrians will not make the mistake of leaving. Ashurbanipal brings engineers to fortify positions and establish permanent occupation of. The greatest military confrontation of the ancient world approaches its climax. Taharqa musters every soldier from Nubia and Upper Egypt for defense. He knows this battle will decide whether Kush survives as power. The armies meet south of Memphis in the desert heat under. Assyrian cavalry charges into Kushite lines, wielding iron weapons and discipline. Taharqa's forces fight with desperate courage, but face impossible technological odds. The battle rages throughout the day with terrible casualties on sides. Kushite archers take heavy toll on Assyrian infantry in the morning, but Assyrian siege weapons and iron-armed professionals slowly grind down resistance. By afternoon, the Kushite lines begin to crack under relentless pressure. Taharqa watches his army disintegrate and makes the terrible choice too. The pharaoh orders full retreat south, abandoning all of Egypt forever. His cavalry covers the withdrawal as infantry flee toward Thebes desperately. Assyrian forces pursue, slaughtering thousands of Kushite soldiers in the rout. The road south becomes littered with bodies and abandoned equipment everywhere. Taharqa reaches Thebes and continues fleeing all the way to Napata. Ashurbanipal enters Memphis in triumph and marches on Thebes itself next. The ancient religious capital has never fallen to foreign invasion before. Assyrian siege engines reduce the massive temple walls to rubble systematically. Soldiers plunder centuries of accumulated treasures from the temples of Amun. Thebes burns for days as the greatest city in Africa perishes. The Assyrians take countless prisoners as slaves back to Mesopotamia chained. Gold statues, sacred texts, and temple furnishings become loot for Nineveh. Ashurbanipal declares total victory over the Kushite pharaohs and their supporters. He installs Psamtik I as puppet pharaoh of a new dynasty. The 25th Dynasty ends with Taharqa fleeing to his homeland defeated. Taharqa dies at Napata in 664 BCE, a broken man. His nephew Tantamani inherits the throne and immediately plots revenge against. The young king refuses to accept Assyrian domination of Egypt permanently. He assembles an army and marches north in 663 BCE. Tantamani declares he will restore Kushite rule over the Nile Valley. The invasion initially succeeds as Egyptians welcome Kushite rule over Assyrian. Memphis falls to Tantamani's forces, and Psamtik flees to the delta. For brief months, it appears the 25th Dynasty will continue ruling. But Ashurbanipal receives news of the rebellion and responds with overwhelming force. The Assyrian army returns to Egypt larger and more determined than ever. Tantamani meets the Assyrians in battle near Memphis with inadequate forces. The Kushite king watches his army shatter against Assyrian iron, and he retreats south, pursued by enemy cavalry all the way to Thebes still smolders from its previous destruction when Tantamani passes through. The pharaoh reaches Napata and abandons all claims to Egypt forever. Ashurbanipal orders the complete destruction of Thebes as final punishment for. Assyrian engineers systematically demolish every major temple and palace in the city that stood for 2,000 years disappears in months. Thebes becomes ruins that will inspire Greek poets centuries later with. The message is clear: challenge Assyria and face total annihilation completely. Tantamani rules Kush from Napata for the next decade without Egypt. The kingdom retreats to its Nubian heartland, licking its terrible wounds. But Kush does not die despite losing its greatest conquest forever. The pharaohs turn their attention south, building temples and developing Nubian. A new culture emerges, blending Egyptian traditions with indigenous Kushite elements. The royal cemetery at Nuri becomes the burial place for kings. Taharqa's pyramid there is the largest in Nubia, standing 63. The steep-sided pyramids differ from Egyptian designs with sharper angles distinctly. Each contains underground burial chambers decorated with scenes from the afterlife. The pyramids become symbols of Kushite identity, separate from Egyptian influence. At Jebel Barkal, the temple complex continues growing under Tantamani's rule. The sacred mountain remains the spiritual heart of the Kushite kingdom. Priests perform elaborate rituals, maintaining the cult of Amun for generations. The synthesis of Nubian and Egyptian religious practices creates unique traditions. Kush develops its own cultural identity, no longer Egypt's shadow anymore. Trade routes shift south as Kush loses access to Mediterranean markets. The kingdom develops connections with sub-Saharan Africa, bringing new resources north. Ironworking advances as Kushites learn from Assyrian technology captured in. The capital will eventually move to Meroe, even further south than. Kush survives its defeat, transforming into something new and distinct always. The aftermath in Egypt and Assyria, Psamtik I consolidates power in Egypt, establishing the 26th dynasty. He carefully balances submission to Assyria with gradual assertion of independence. When Assyria weakens, fighting Babylon, and Medes Psamtik stops paying tribute, Egypt regains independence, but never again rules the vast empire of. The age of Egyptian dominance ends permanently with Kushite defeat finally. Assyria itself faces catastrophic decline within decades of destroying Thebes completely. The empire overextends, fighting wars on too many fronts simultaneously always. Babylon rebels and allies with the Medes to destroy Nineveh finally. In 612 BCE, the capital falls, and Assyrian empire collapses entirely. The victors who defeated Kush disappear from history within 50 years. The Kushite kingdom continues for another 1,000 years after losing Egypt. They build over 200 pyramids at Meroe and other sites. Kushite queens, called Kandakis, rule with absolute power unprecedented in Africa. The kingdom develops the Meroitic script, creating Africa's second writing system. Trade with Rome, India, and sub-Saharan Africa makes Meroe wealthy again. But the pyramids at Nuri tell the story of the dynasties. Taharqa's monument stands as testament to Kush's brief Golden Age ruling. The steep-sided structures differ from Egyptian designs, proclaiming Kushite identity proudly. They survive 2,000 years in the desert waiting for discovery. The Black Pharaohs ruled Egypt for less than a century total. Yet their impact on Egyptian culture lasts for generations after defeat. The 25th Dynasty restored temples, revived ancient traditions, and commissioned masterpieces. Egyptian art incorporates African elements that persist through subsequent dynasties always. The Renaissance they sparked continues even under native Egyptian rule forever. But who were these Black Pharaohs whose legacy history almost lost? For 2,000 years, the 25th Dynasty disappeared from Western consciousness. Classical Greek and Roman writers mention Kush, briefly dismissing it as medieval, and Renaissance scholars focused on Egyptian and Mediterranean civilizations exclusively. The Black Pharaohs became footnotes ignored by historians and archaeologists alike. European colonialism in the 19th century actively suppressed African achievement narratives. In 1821, Italian explorer Giuseppe Fellini reached Meroe's pyramids finally. The treasure hunter demolished over 40 pyramids, searching for gold greedily. He destroyed monuments that survived 2,000 years in mere months. Fellini found jewelry from Queen Amenhotep's pyramid, but obliterated historical evidence. His vandalism delayed understanding of Kushite civilization for generations after him. American archaeologist George Reisner excavated Nubian sites from 1916 to 23. His work at Nuri uncovered Taharqa's pyramid and royal burial chambers. Reisner found evidence of sophisticated burial practices rivaling Egyptian traditions completely. But his racial prejudices led him to attribute Kushite achievements too. He could not accept that black Africans created such advanced civilization. French archaeologist Jean Leclantre challenged Reisner's racist interpretations in the 1950s. He demonstrated Kushite culture developed independently with unique characteristics distinctly its. The discovery of Piye's victory, Stela at Gebel Barkal, revolutionized understanding. The detailed account described the conquest of Egypt in Piye's own. Suddenly the Black Pharaohs emerged from obscurity as historical reality, undeniable. Timothy Kendall's excavations at Jebel Barkal from 1980 onward revealed more. The sacred mountain's religious significance explained why Kushites believed divine mandate. Temples built into the cliff face contained inscriptions detailing religious practices. The archaeology proved Kushites were not imitating Egyptians, but creating synthesis. Jebel Barkal became recognized as spiritual heart of the Kushite Empire. Over 250 pyramids stand in Sudan, more than Egypt. These monuments tell stories Western scholarship ignored for 2 millennia completely. The pyramids at Meroe date from 270 BCE to 350 CE. They mark royal burials for over 600 years of history. Each pyramid contains clues about the rulers buried within their chambers. Unlike Egyptian pyramids, Nubian structures have burial chambers below ground level. The pyramids themselves are solid masonry, serving as elaborate tombstones essentially. Steep angles, ranging from 60 to 70 degrees, make them distinctive visually. Chapels attached to pyramid sides contained offering tables and relief carvings. The carvings depict rulers receiving tribute and worshipping Nubian and Egyptian. Archaeological excavations revealed sophisticated burial practices, including mummification of bodies carefully. Gold jewelry, bronze weapons, and pottery accompanied the dead into afterlife. Horse harnesses found in tombs prove the importance of cavalry to Kushites. Shabti figures, miniature servants meant to serve rulers in death, appear. The burial practices blend Egyptian concepts with distinctive Nubian cultural elements always. Taharqa's pyramid at Nuri stands as the largest in Nubia today. Its base measures nearly 100 feet on each side originally. The underground burial chamber extends 50 feet below the desert surface. Archaeologists found his sarcophagus broken by ancient tomb robbers seeking treasures. But inscriptions remain identifying the occupant as Taharqa, king of Kush. Recent excavations at Dangeil uncovered a temple dedicated to Amun-Bai. The site revealed statues showing Taharqa with distinctly African facial features clearly. The artistic style celebrates Nubian identity rather than copying Egyptian conventions exactly. These discoveries prove Kushites maintained cultural distinctiveness even while ruling Egypt. The synthesis created something new, not mere imitation of Egyptian civilization. Around 200 BCE, Kushites stopped writing in Egyptian hieroglyphics completely. They developed the Meroitic script, consisting of 23 symbols and characters. This writing system represented African innovation, creating the continent's second alphabet. Thousands of inscriptions survive on temple walls, pyramids, and pottery fragments. But scholars still cannot fully translate Meroitic despite recognizing the alphabet. The script appears in two forms, hieroglyphic for monuments and cursive. The cursive form appears on everyday objects, suggesting widespread literacy among. Meroitic reads from right to left, unlike Egyptian hieroglyphics' direction variations. Scholars can read individual words and names, but grammar remains mysterious. The inability to translate Meroitic leaves vast portions of Kushite history. Recent computational analysis and comparison with related languages offers new hope. Researchers study patterns in royal names and titles, seeking linguistic clues. Each new inscription discovered provides additional data for decipherment attempts ongoing. When Meroitic is finally translated, it will revolutionize understanding of Kush. An entire civilization's literature, history, and daily life awaits revelation completely. Kushite culture allowed women to rule with absolute authority unprecedented elsewhere. The title, Kandake or Candace, designated ruling queens, not mere consorts. Queen Amanirenas ruled from approximately 40 BCE to 10 BCE with power. She led armies against Roman Egypt, winning significant victories against occupiers. Roman historians described the one-eyed warrior queen with grudging respect always. In 24 BCE, Roman forces under Petronius invaded Nubia, seeking tribute. Queen Amanirenas counterattacked leading armies that captured Aswan from the Romans. Her forces demolished Roman statues, bringing back a bronze head of. The head was buried beneath a temple threshold, so worshippers trampled. This symbolic gesture showed contempt for Roman imperial pretensions in Africa. Emperor Augustus eventually negotiated peace treaty with Amanirenas on favorable terms. Rome exempted Kush from tribute, acknowledging the kingdom's military strength clearly. The treaty established borders that lasted for 3 centuries without war. Amanirenas, proved Kushite military prowess, survived long after losing Egypt finally. Her reign demonstrated the continuing power of Africa's great Nubian kingdom. Excavations at Meroe uncovered palaces where these powerful queens ruled absolutely. The royal city covered 1 square mile with temples, palaces, and water systems, including elaborate baths, shows sophisticated urban planning and engineering. Iron slag heaps indicate Meroe was a major metallurgical center producing. The city controlled trade routes connecting Mediterranean world with sub-Saharan Africa. The 25th Dynasty appears in the Hebrew Bible multiple times significantly. Isaiah chapter 37 describes how God saved Jerusalem from Sennacherib's siege. The account mentions Taharqa, king of Kush, coming to fight. This Taharqa is clearly Taharqa, whose intervention helped save the city. Biblical narrative confirms Kushite role in defending Judah against Assyrian invasion. The prophet Isaiah also mentions Kush repeatedly in his prophecies about. He describes messengers coming from Kush in tall ships of papyrus. Isaiah portrays Kushites as powerful allies and subjects of divine attention. The biblical text recognizes Kush as major power dominating the region. These references confirm Kushite historical importance to the ancient Near East. The Book of Kings describes Queen of Sheba visiting King Solomon. Some scholars argue this queen came from Kush, not Arabian Peninsula. Ethiopian tradition claims the Solomonic dynasty descended from this union historically. While debated, the theory highlights Kush's connections throughout the ancient world. The kingdom's influence extended far beyond the Nile Valley's geographic boundaries. Archaeological evidence supports biblical accounts of Kushite-Assyrian conflicts in the Levant. Assyrian records found at Nineveh describe battles against Taharqa's forces exactly. The convergence of biblical Assyrian and Egyptian sources confirms basic historical. Taharqa emerges as historical figure, not mythical character from scripture alone. Multiple independent sources verify the Black Pharaohs' role in shaping history. Meroe became one of Africa's earliest major ironworking centers, producing. Massive slag heaps surrounding the city indicate industrial-scale metal production ongoing. Kushites smelted iron ore using local hardwoods as fuel for furnaces. The kingdom supplied iron tools and weapons throughout northeastern Africa extensively. This technological advancement gave Kush economic and military advantages for centuries. Iron production began after contact with Assyrians, who brought the technology. Kushites captured or traded for iron weapons during their Egyptian campaigns. They reverse-engineered the metallurgy, developing their own smelting techniques independently soon. By 200 BCE, Meroe rivaled any ironworking center in world. The kingdom transformed from Bronze Age culture to Iron Age power. Iron tools revolutionized agriculture, allowing more efficient farming in Nubian territory. Iron weapons gave Kushite armies advantages over neighbors using bronze steel. The economic prosperity from iron trade sustained the kingdom for centuries. Meroe controlled the iron supply for entire regions of Africa below. This technological edge explains how Kush survived long after losing Egypt. Recent metallurgical analysis of Kushite iron reveals sophisticated alloying techniques employed. Smiths produced steel by controlling carbon content in their forging processes. The quality of Kushite metalwork rivals anything produced in the Mediterranean world. These discoveries challenge assumptions about African technological capabilities in ancient times. Kush was not a backwater, but an innovative industrial power. Today, the pyramids of Meroe stand in Sudan, visited by few. Political instability and limited tourism infrastructure keep most travelers away, unfortunately. UNESCO designated the sites as World Heritage, requiring protection and preservation. But funding remains inadequate to properly conserve these irreplaceable monuments fully. The pyramids slowly erode from windsand and neglect threatening there. The Sudanese people maintain pride in their Kushite heritage despite challenges. The pyramids appear on currency and official symbols of national identity. Schools teach about the Black Pharaohs as part of Sudan's history, but ongoing conflicts and economic hardship limit archaeological research and conservation. The world's attention remains focused elsewhere, while Sudan's treasures crumble slowly. International archaeological teams continue working when security permits access to sites. Recent discoveries include additional temple statues and inscriptions awaiting full analysis. Ground-penetrating radar suggests dozens of undiscovered tombs remain buried in. Each excavation season reveals new information about Kushite civilization and culture. But the work proceeds slowly with limited funding and frequent interruptions. Climate change threatens the pyramids as desert conditions become more extreme. Rare heavy rains cause structural damage to monuments built for dry. Rising temperatures accelerate erosion of sandstone and mud brick construction materials. Without intervention, many structures will not survive another century of exposure. The race to document and preserve Kushite heritage accelerates against time. Why the Black Pharaohs matter. The 25th Dynasty challenges Western narratives about African capabilities and history. These were sophisticated rulers who conquered and governed Egypt effectively. They revived ancient traditions, commissioned artistic masterpieces, and defended their realm. Kush developed writing systems, metallurgy, architecture, and governance rivaling any civilization. The evidence demolishes racist assumptions about African inferiority persisting into modern. The cultural synthesis achieved under Kushite rule enriched Egyptian civilization permanently. Art styles evolved incorporating African elements that continued through subsequent dynasties. Religious practices deepened as Kushites revived ancient rituals and temple traditions. The Renaissance they sparked influenced Egyptian culture for generations after their. History shows cross-cultural exchange produces innovation, not decline or corruption ever. The military history reveals African kingdoms as formidable powers in ancient. Kushite cavalry and archery threatened even mighty Assyrian armies in battle. Queen Amanirinas defeated Roman legions, forcing favorable peace treaties from emperors. These were not primitive peoples, but sophisticated military powers commanding respect. The narrative of African military weakness collapses before the historical evidence. The pyramids themselves stand as testament to Kushite architectural achievement, undeniable. Over 250 monuments demonstrate sustained engineering capability for centuries. The distinctive style proves cultural independence, not mere Egyptian imitation always. Modern engineers marvel at construction techniques that survive 2,000 years. These structures demand recognition as world heritage equal to any monuments. The tragedy is how completely Western scholarship ignored this civilization. Racist assumptions led archaeologists to dismiss or minimize Kushite achievements systematically. Even after discoveries proved Kushite sophistication, old prejudices died slowly, reluctantly. Only in recent decades has full recognition emerged of Kush's significance. How many other African civilizations remain obscured by similar historical blindness? The Kushite kingdom survived for over 1,000 years after losing. It traded with Rome, India, Arabia, and sub-Saharan Africa, maintaining prosperity. The civilization ended around 350 CE, possibly due to environmental changes. Rising Aksumite power from Ethiopia may have contributed to Meroe's decline, but Kush's legacy survived in successor states and regional cultural traditions. The unanswered questions. Despite decades of research, fundamental mysteries about Kush remain completely unresolved. The inability to translate Meroitic script leaves vast knowledge gaps unfilled. Scholars debate the ethnic composition of Kushite society and racial identity. The relationship between Nubian indigenous culture and Egyptian imports remains contested. Each new discovery raises additional questions, demanding further investigation and research. Why did Kush abandon attempts to reconquer Egypt after Tantamani's defeat? The kingdom possessed military strength to challenge Egyptian puppet rulers repeatedly. Yet, after 663 BCE, no further invasions occurred despite opportunities. Did Kushite rulers decide Egypt was not worth the cost? Or did religious or cultural factors make abandonment preferable to continued? How did Kushite queens achieve such unprecedented political power in antiquity? No other ancient civilization granted women such absolute authority regularly, and the Kandakis ruled, commanded armies, and negotiated treaties with major powers. What cultural or religious factors enabled this remarkable gender equality uniquely? The answer might reveal important insights about Nubian society and values. What caused the final collapse of Meroe around 350 Common Era? Environmental degradation from deforestation for iron smelting may have contributed significantly. Climate change could have disrupted agricultural productivity in the Nile Valley. Aksumite military pressure possibly forced population movements and economic disruption severely. The exact causes remain debated among scholars studying the kingdom's end. Thousands of sites remain unexcavated throughout Sudan, waiting for archaeological attention. Budget constraints, political instability, and limited infrastructure prevent systematic exploration fully. Each unexplored pyramid, tomb, and temple contains potential revolutionary discoveries inside. The complete story of Kush remains buried in Sudan's sands, awaiting. Future generations may finally uncover the full truth about this civilization. Final reflections on a lost legacy. The Black Pharaohs ruled Egypt for less than a century total, but their impact on history, culture, and civilization far exceeds that. They preserved and revived Egyptian traditions when Egypt itself had forgotten. They defended Jerusalem, influenced biblical narrative, and challenged Assyrian imperial ambitions. They built monuments, created writing systems, and established trade networks spanning continents. For 2,000 years, their achievements vanished from Western historical consciousness. Racist ideology and Eurocentric scholarship dismissed African capabilities and contributions systematically. The pyramids stood in Sudan, ignored while tourists flocked to Egypt. This civilization, equal to any in the ancient world, remained unknown. Only modern archaeology has begun revealing the truth buried by prejudice. Today, the Kushite legacy challenges us to question historical narratives critically. What other civilizations has history forgotten, marginalized, or deliberately obscured from? How many African, Asian, and indigenous American achievements remain unrecognized still? The Black Pharaohs remind us that history belongs to all humanity. Every culture deserves recognition for its contributions to human civilization overall. The pyramids of Meroe still stand sentinel in the Sudanese desert. They wait for the world to finally recognize their significance fully. These monuments prove that Africa produced sophisticated, advanced civilizations independently always. The 25th Dynasty wrote its own chapter in the story of. Their legacy demands remembrance, respect, and continued study by future generations forever. The Black Pharaohs saved Egypt, revived its culture, and defended civilization. They ruled with wisdom, built with skill, and fought with courage. Then history forgot them for 2,000 years of deliberate erasure. Now archaeology and scholarship restore them to their rightful place in. This is the story of Kush, the kingdom the world forgot. If you enjoyed this journey through forgotten history, please like this. Subscribe to our channel Unleash Facts for more untold historical stories. The past holds countless narratives waiting to be rediscovered and shared. Together we can ensure these stories survive for generations yet to. Thank you for watching, and remember, the past belongs to everyone.